Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of the From the Depths podcast. As always, my name is Emmett and you're very, very welcome to the show. So, on this episode of the show, unfortunately, there will be no guest. I had 2 interviews slotted for this past week, and unfortunately, due to the ongoing and ever-changing landscape that comes with the global pandemic, they unfortunately were not able to go ahead. And it was just, working conditions for both sides just wasn't doable this week, so they will be, of course, happening again in the future. Very much look forward to having both guests on the show at some point, and obviously wish them all the best and all that crack. But left me in a weird position where I am left to my own devices this week. I have no guest, so I was like, shit, what am I going to do? And I was thankfully handed a gold mine by just pure chance. I realised that I had never done an introduction episode of the podcast, and I'm going to do a little bit of that now just to give people an idea of what the podcast is going to be about and give you an idea who I am and what it is that I do. So, From the Depths, the From the Depths podcast is pretty much a podcast where I am trying my absolute best, and I'm probably failing at it so far, but it takes time for these things to happen. I'm trying to capture the feeling and conversations that we have in smoking area of venues during gigs. When between bands, when everyone's thrown out to the smoking area, people who don't smoke are suddenly smoking, there's pints flying all around, everyone's on top form, everyone's buzzing, particularly after the opening band and stuff like that. People are just raring to get into it and get going and stuff. And it, for me, in the pandemic world, that is what I've missed the most, is being able to go to gigs and stuff like that. Because for me, it's my equivalent of, a lot of people have it with GAA, a lot of people have it with football and stuff like that. For me, my thing that I invested a lot of my time and efforts into was always heavy metal music, and without live music and stuff like that, a big part of my regular routine was gone. And the first month or two was fine. It kind of felt like a novelty. I was like, oh, it's be back again at some point in the future. We're now just under a year into the lockdown here. It's obviously eased at points, but live music has not been a thing here since last February. It is slowly itching up on a year since I was at my last gig. The last gig I was at was the first night of Urban Assault in Cork last year. And my God, that genuinely feels like 2 years ago now. But yeah, I wanted to create a podcast where it was basically a forum where, if I wanted to talk to someone, if there was someone I had a particular interest in chatting with, that I'd be able to chat away with them. But more importantly, I kind of wanted to put a spotlight on the punters. And by punters, I mean the gig goers and lads who run gigs and stuff like that, more so than I did the bands. And the reason for that is, this is very much an Irish-based podcast, and it is very, I will have a lot of people on the podcast interview that are in bands and stuff like that. There's a lot of confirmed names that I'm very much looking forward to sitting down with. But I wanted more to sit down with, your girlfriend's dad, who's been going to gigs since 1975, who has never ran a gig or played in a band or anything like this, but he's seen everyone there is to see, and he'd been through it all. Do you know what I mean? He's seen it all come and go and all that kind of crack. I wanted to sit down more with people like that, because when I go to gigs and I'm in the smoking area, that is who I naturally end up chatting to the most. And that's they're the conversations I enjoy the most. And it kind of, doing a podcast gave me an excuse to go and try and actually actively seek out those conversations again. So they haven't happened so far. I've been very, very lucky, don't get me wrong, with the first 3 episodes. The first 3 episodes, I couldn't have landed with more solid guests and stuff like that. I really expected, though, those type of interviews like I got for the first 3 episodes, I didn't expect them to actually come along until later into the show's existence. So to get those very early on, I was very, very lucky. I expected the first few episodes to be me chatting to, older lads from the scene and stuff like that, over Skype calls and getting stories out of them. And they will come. Don't get me wrong, they will come sooner rather than later and all that kind of crack. But I did expect that to be the earlier episodes of the show. So I was very, very lucky in that regard, that things worked out a lot better for me anyway, that I got 3 absolutely fantastic solid guests to start off with. So yeah, that's what I'm aiming with for the podcast. As well as that, how I aim to recreate that kind of atmosphere and stuff like that is, I'll do it through kind of ranty episodes like this, where I might talk about a topic for an hour or so. I'll have panel conversations. I have a few lined up that are around topics, and then I have others in which we might talk about a specific year in metal, talk about our favourite releases from that year. We might talk about our favourite albums by a specific band, our favorite albums from a specific subgenre of metal. There's a lot of those to come, and I'm very, very much looking forward to having the guests that I have lined up for those episodes on, because if it wasn't for a podcast like this, they wouldn't really get a chance to be on something like that, nor would I get an opportunity to talk in a public forum like this, don't get me wrong. But I'm very much, the people I have lined up for those panel episodes are people with 101 things to say, and I'm very much looking forward to all of you listening at home getting a chance to actually hear what they do have to say. So if you're wondering what From the Depths is, From the Depths existed for a long time before the podcast, about a year before the podcast was launched. It started as a radio show in LIT. So I do a weekly radio show for a radio station called Wired 99.9 FM, which is Limerick's only fully licensed student radio station. And the radio show is just called From the Depths. And I had done radio shows in the past. I did one for Clare FM around 2013, 2014. I did one in LCFE, and I did one called Live Wire with a mate of mine, Caleb, for Wired FM back in 2016, 2017. And I was studying music at the time, and I took 2 years away from college. And when I decided to go back to college in 2018, I want to say, I met Ray from Wired FM at a ham sandwich gig of all gigs. And he was asking me if I was coming back. I said I was, and he said you should definitely jump on board and do something again. And I've been doing it with Wired FM ever since. And you can listen into that show every week at 8 p.m. every Wednesday on Wired 99.9 FM. The show is called From the Depths, Cuts from the Crypt, and it is basically me just sitting down and playing what I've been listening to over the past week. And that, yeah. And I enjoy putting those shows together, and you can listen to those again, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Wired FM. So yeah, let's get into this week's topic. So I'm talking about online, the relationship between social media, like online culture, and heavy metal music. And I am of course going to be talking about a specific group on Facebook by the name of Ireland Metalheads, which the majority of you listening are probably going to be aware of in some form or another. There was some drama relating to Ireland Metalheads this past week. I'll be touching on that in a moment, but for now, let's actually talk about what Ireland Metalheads is. So Ireland Metalheads is an online Facebook group that formed a little over a year ago, and basically acts as, for better or for worse, a platform to promote all things Irish heavy metal. That's pretty much what it is. It is basically just a collective of people who have the best intentions of sharing and promoting and talking all things Irish heavy metal. Does it actually do that? I would argue no. But the best of intentions are there, and I don't mean that as a quip at the lads or anything like this. The intentions are there, but the goals of which the page was founded, I do not think they've achieved a year in. Like I said, it was formed a little over a year ago. The group has grown exponentially over the year. Month by month, they're going up in the thousands. I am so off with the figures now. I'm not sure if it's 15,000 or 100,000 people are on that group at the moment. Yeah, but it's huge. It's really, really big. And to be honest with you, my main gripe with the page, someone could easily accuse me of ageism now, but I think the point I made a minute or two ago about wanting to have older people older members of the Irish metal community on here to chat about older gigs and stuff like that is a testament that I'm not an ageist in any way. The main bulk of people on that group are between the ages of 35 and up as far as mid to late 50s, I would say, maybe early 60s. And a lot of people that are on that group have been lost in the loop with things related to Irish metal, probably for the better part of 2 decades now. Quite often you see people going, Jesus, there's nothing happening in Ireland. Oh my God, wouldn't it be brilliant if someone put together something where we got a load of Irish bands playing and start a scene here again, despite the fact that there is a very, very active scene here in Ireland, and I would argue a more active scene than there has ever been in Ireland. And obviously I'm too young to be able to testify to that through experience, but through conversations I've had with older people in the scene and stuff like that, they would very, very much be of the mindset that pre-pandemic we had a lot more going on here in Ireland in relation to metal than we ever had. And there's a lot of people on that group that believe otherwise, and it's a false founded belief, and there is absolutely no merit or proof to what they're backing. I believe a lot of the people that have that mentality are people who are big into like Disturbed and System of a Down, and read loads of Kerrang and Metal Hammer in 2002 or 2003, and then they left school and they still went to Slane and stuff like that, and they might have went over to Donington once or twice, but the real world caught up with them and they had kids and mortgages and stuff like that, and going to local gigs wasn't a priority anymore, and they just got lost in the loop. And then with the rate of which Irish metalheads grew, they landed upon it, and enough people believe in that and thinking it. In when you know when you've someone believe in the same nonsense you believe in, they say it back to you. You're reaffirming each other's absolute lies, like, and bullshit. But yeah, and I think it's just a catalyst for sharing false information and stuff about the scene and everything. And my hat goes off to, there's loads of you probably listen have probably tried this, where you're all involved in the scene and stuff like that, and you try and share and promote actual positive things and things that are actually happening, contemporary bands, contemporary gigs, all that type of stuff. And it's most often met with like a patronizing response, I find. Unless the thing that you're sharing or promoting is very successful, they don't really like to engage with it. And proof in the pudding of that is if you share anything in relation to Ten Ton Slug, who are very successful and well deserving of their success, a very successful Irish metal band. If you share something to do with them, you have a lot of people like going, "Oh yeah, horns up, brother," and fucking saying all this false founded, over the top, fucking trying to compensate with this false founded manliness bullshit. You know, there's very much a lot of that going on, where lads in their 50s are fucking wearing bandanas of Confederate flags and wearing a Slayer top out the back and throwing up the horns and grunting and shit. Stuff that just fucking turns my stomach because it's just so fucking childish and stupid. And yeah, there's just a lot of carry on like that on it. If you were to share a band that was just after forming in the last 2 months, would you get any engagement? If you put up a fucking essay attached to your post, you probably would. A lot of the time I see new bands getting engagement with people on Ireland Metalheads is because of shit like that, where they go, "Oh, we've just formed. I've been trying really, really hard to get songs together during lockdown, and we'd really appreciate it if you listen to our demo." And then you have like a load of people in their 40s going, "Oh yeah, brother, we'll check that out. Oh, rock on, man." And you're just like, "Oh, fuck off." So yeah, my general issue with Ireland Metalheads is a severe lack of self-awareness. But sure, look, these things happen, like, you know what I mean? Of course, if people lose out in the loop of what's been going on here for the better part of 2 decades, is a reason for it. Like, the real world always obviously comes first. But at the same time, it does post, it is a minority of people in that age group that spout that shit. And the most productive people in the Irish metal scene are people between between the ages of 35 and 55. Like, you know what I mean? That's the age group that are in prominent bands within the scene. That's the age group of lads that are regularly promoting gigs. That's the age group of lads and lasses that are really putting their best foot forward and making the scene something enjoyable for all of us, like I said, to enjoy. So what was the drama relating to Ireland Metalheads this week? So there's been lots of like he says, she said type of shits around that group since it started off. I'm not going to feed into that because it's not really the forum for it. I'll give my 2 cents and stuff, but I'm not going to go and plaster he said, she said shit online either. But what did happen was Ireland Metalheads was due to put on an event last year entitled Gathering. It was due to go ahead last April, I do believe, but due to the pandemic, it had to be postponed. And it's been postponed longer than it was even being promoted at this stage, naturally because of the pandemic. And for one reason or another, Dublin thrash band Psychosis decided this past week to disassociate themselves from Ireland Metalheads, and as well as that, they decided to pretty much just kind of like out and out the group name and shame them. It came across really, really poorly to me. I don't know about you listening at home. But, you know, Psychosis are not a young band. Psychosis have been together for, if not a decade, maybe more. I don't know. I could be wrong. I know they've been together for long enough that they shouldn't be doing that type of shit. If you want to, like, a main point I took away from that was they said they wanted to maintain professionalism. I am not taking the side of either party with this now, but if you want to maintain professionalism, a good rule of thumb is not to post your dirty laundry online. That's not really a good thing to be doing. And I would believe that them doing that has probably got a few promoters now in Ireland being like, well, are we going to have these lads on line up again if they're going to pull this type of shit? Like, do you know what I mean? Maybe it came about because there has been like a collective thing that it's okay to kind of slate Ireland Metalheads and like online, and I think it comes about from the lack of self-awareness, like I touched on a moment ago, where people are saying nothing has happened here for 20 years and stuff like that. I think that is like a free pass considered by a lot of people to openly slate the group. So maybe it came across, maybe that was the intention, that they were joining in the slating or stuff like that. Did not come across as such to me. Even worse still, actually, I must mention there was some issues there. They decided to leave. They decided that they did not want to play the gig anymore, and that is totally understandable. That's up to them and everything like that. A lot of people have been quick to say, "Well, you're going to play on a bill by being put together by a lad who's never organised gigs before," and I would argue, well, every promoter, regardless of how long they've been running gigs, at some point or another has to run their first gig. And given how big Ireland Metalheads got over its first year and primarily over its first 6 months, it would make sense that they would run a gig to that level with that type of caliber of bands that were playing. A lot of the bands that were playing were regular staples in Fibber McGee's in Dublin. And for whatever reason, after Psychosis decided to put that out there, whether it was from false founded solidarity or from a severe further lack of self-awareness, a lot of other Irish metal bands decided to do the exact same thing. A lot of bands that did, now the majority of bands that did it, a lot of bands pulled out from the lineup and stuff like that. Again, understandable. That's their choice. Posting that stuff, whether or not it was in solidarity or not, again, it just comes across as very childish to me. But sure, look, I'm not playing the gig, I'm not running the gig, so what difference does it make to me? But the catalyst, which I found fucking hilarious, was that there was bands who were not playing the gig who decided to post a message in the same vein. A band by the name of Saint Slaughter did this, where they said, we are standing in solidarity with our brothers in Psychosis by disassociating ourselves with Ireland Metalheads and stuff like this. And I find it very rich that a band would go and disassociate themselves from something that they weren't invited to play in the first place. It kind of screamed as it came across to me as a desperate cry for attention, as if Saint Slaughter have been relevant for the last fucking 5 years anyway. But alas, we continue. So a lot of bands that were due to play on that decided to drop out of the lineup. Again, understandable, and it leaves the gig in some bit of a limbo. There has been rumours going around that this happened involving this person, and this person said this, and this person did that. None of which has been validated by either side. Neither side have confirmed or denied any of. Well, they have the fella behind Ireland Metalheads has denied a lot of the things being said against him. Again, I'm not going to air either side's dirty laundry out on this forum, as it's not the place for it. But what's to be learnt from this? Don't air your dirty laundry on social media. Particularly, do not air your dirty laundry on your band account on social media, because whatever claims you have of acting professional, it is the most unprofessional thing you could do. If it was a case where he was extorting money out of them, if it was a case where he was asking for inappropriate requests off them, understandable, but you know what I mean. You really don't need to go and be posting that shit. If you're going to post that shit and you're going to do it so ambiguously where there's no direct reasons given as to why, you're creating conversation, you're creating rumors and stuff like that. And the very important thing to be taken away from this is whether or not the rumors are surrounding Ireland Metalheads and the individual behind Ireland Metalheads are true or not. That is still someone that has to bear the brunt of those rumors and stuff like that. So if you are going to air your dirty laundry in such a manner on social media, specifically through your band account, you owe not the people going to the gig an explanation, but you do owe the people that would feed into those rumours an explanation. Because, do you know what I mean? People could take a rumour and run it for a mile, and something that could have started very, very mildly could turn into something very, very serious very, very quickly. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, so we're talking about the relationship between online heavy metal culture and online culture, and heavy metal music. And I've decided to break this into 3 categories. We're going to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of which relate to Ireland Metalheads, but the aforementioned drama is the last. I hope to be specifically referring to Ireland Metalheads for the rest of this episode of the podcast. So what are the good aspects of the relationship between heavy metal music and online like social media and stuff like that? So in this day and age, it's easier to promote your stuff than ever before. Literally at the click of a finger, you have an audience of millions. Like, so if you were to go and you have an album on the way, and if you've been together a while and stuff like that, and you already have a fandom behind you, if you go and you have the artwork ready to go and stuff like that, you share that on social media, share it onto groups, share it onto metal groups, stuff like that, share it on your Instagram, wherever. It's going to do the rounds that way. People are going to know about the album quicker. It's a lot easier to do that than to pay for like an advertisement in a magazine. And one would make the argument, is print media dead? So is it even worth paying money to get your advert printed in a magazine? It's easier to find new music now than ever as well. And I thought about that because people often say that it's like it's so much easier to find new music. I would argue at the same point it's easier to find old music too. There's plenty of bands that I know about that I have absolutely no right knowing about, and it's kind of the privilege I've been granted by being born in this day and age is the reason why I know about these bands. One in specifically I'm referring to is a band by the name of Gotham City. Gotham City now are, of course, an infamous meme here in Ireland over the Clang Metal Fest and everything like that, and have become a meme yet again in the wake of the online drama surrounding the Ireland Metal Hits thing last week. But they're a fantastic band, and the reason I say I shouldn't know about them was they only had 2 albums in an EP, and all were in limited prints. And to buy a physical copy of either Gotham City, either of the Gotham City albums or the EP, you're looking at a couple of €100, like, do you know what I mean? So if it wasn't for YouTube and old Facebook groups that share old traditional heavy metal and stuff like that, we wouldn't be able to find out about groups like that. Another example is a band called Heavy Load. Phil Lynott, of course, played on one of the Heavy Load albums. But I know a few years ago I was living with my mate Jack, and he was obsessed with Heavy Load at the time. And there was a point where it was so hard to come by Heavy Load albums that people were selling the sleeves separate to the album. So people were spending 40, €50 on the sleeve and then would hope to find the album somewhere else from a seller. And to buy the two together, Jesus, you were looking at €500 or €600. So yeah, it is a very, very handy aspect of online culture now that it's so easy to find new and old music at the click of a finger. And it's really the great thing about those online groups. Like, you know, there's like obscure heavy metal vinyl groups, there's traditional heavy metal groups, you know, whatever your subgenres of choice are, there's groups on Facebook for those where you can find brilliant stuff both new and old, again at the click of a finger. For me, I know that like my primary interest metal wise is I love the new wave British heavy metal. I'm massive into black metal. I love traditional sound heavy metal, and as well as that, I love doom in the style of like Sabbath and Pentagram. I like a little bit of that kind of like sleep worship type of doom too, but I primarily like bands that worship the shit out of Pentagram and Black Sabbath. And there's loads of groups online to find bands that play in those veins at the click of a finger. So that's the good aspects of the online, or the relationship between the internet and heavy metal. But what are the bad? And there's 101 of these. The first one I want to touch on is, like I just said a minute ago, it's easier to promote, but it's also easier to get lost in the shuffle. It's very, very easy to get lost in the shuffle nowadays as a metal band trying to get your stuff out there, because it's so much easier to record and make albums now. But it's just as easy to actually gain access to albums. It's not the same as it was really when I was a kid buying my first CDs, where the internet wasn't really a thing. Or so you'd buy your CD and you'd sit with that CD for weeks and months at a time because you'd paid money for it. And even if you didn't really like it that much the first listen, you'd give it the college try for the second and third and the fourth listen, and you'd eventually, if you didn't love it, you'd at least be able to tolerate it and you'd like it. You invest more time in your albums and stuff like that. Whereas now it's not the same. And I'm guilty of this. I'm very, very guilty of this because I have to put together a weekly radio show for Wired FM, and when I do that, I need to be looking for tracks all week. And there is definitely tracks I come across that if we didn't live in the age of the internet, that the albums those tracks are on, I would probably love those albums because I would sit with them more and I'd give it more of a chance. But that's kind of gone now because there's so much access to music, and music is being thrown at you left, right and centre. It's very easy to overlook stuff, and it's harder for bands to be noticed in that respect then, because unless you're a band like Malach or Patton, for example, who are doing something totally different, it's very hard to stand out. If you are a bare bones run-of-the-mill thrash band, it can be really hard to stand out, particularly in thrash, because thrash is so prominent now. Thrash has always been a huge subgenre of metal, but it's particularly big now. We're kind of living in the age where we're just the new wave of thrash metal that happened throughout the late 2000s, early 2010s has kind of died down somewhat. But in its wake, we now have 110 copy-paste thrash bands that have the same like Toxic Holocaust logo and nuclear barrels and zombies and beer and pizza all over the place. But if you play thrash and you play it well, how do you stand out when you're stuck among a sea of that? Do you know what I mean? It's very hard. But yeah, like I was saying, it's very easy to get lost in the shuffle. There's also a thing surrounding aggressiveness that I find only exists in the age of the internet. It wouldn't exist if social media was a thing. And what I'm referring to is people being particularly harsh and shit like that. Now, I get my criticisms there about how people were acting in relation to the whole situation surrounding Ireland metalheads and stuff. And I was critical there. And like I said at the very beginning of the podcast, although I may be being critical, like I'm not saying that to go and fucking ruin their day or anything either. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going out of my way to fucking ruin whoever's involved's day by criticizing them. Like, do you know what I mean? If you take exception to any of the points I made earlier, prove me wrong, and do something. Do you know what I mean? Do something. Do the opposite of what you came across by doing shit like that. That's what I would say. But in the age of the internet, if I was to go and post that somewhere, we would be having a back and forth, and there'd be 140 comments, and everyone would be watching, and it would just be an absolute shit show. At the same token, relating to like what I just said there about people not really engaging with albums for as long as they used to, people give an album one listen, and that's their critique of it made. I would always be of the mindset that if you want to give a good criticism of an album, for good or for worse, you need to listen to an album about 3 times before actually going to put pen to paper or put your thoughts together about the album. Because, like, you could a great example of this with a film is A Clockwork Orange. Clockwork Orange, there's a lot of things going on in it. It's visually very, very impactful. And you could watch that for the first time. And I know after I watched it for the first time, I was quite young when I saw it. And when I watched it for the first time, I was instantly like taken aback by the visuals of it. I didn't really take into consideration the plot. Didn't really resonate with me at all. I didn't take any notice to it. But upon the second or third viewing, I found the plot to be way more intriguing than any of the visual shit that goes on. And the older you get and you go back to it again and again and again, there's always more meaning to it. And albums are very, very similar, because on face value, an album might not appear to be that big of a deal the first time you listen to it. And I'm not talking about like your relationship with the album is in sometimes people associate an album with like sights and sounds and memories and stuff. I mean sonically, as music, your relationship with how you perceive that album, for better or for worse. Yeah, it's one of those things. People listen to an album, they're instantly just like, boom, it's shit, boom, it's great. There's no really in between anymore. You can listen to it once and be like, oh, it's not that memorable. And then you listen to it, then someone might listen to it once or twice more, and then you see the post 6 months later, I listened to this album and I didn't really get it at the time, and now I get it. And I'm guilty of doing that too. But as well as that, it's I'm guilty of that with my God, I remember, I'm not a Zakk Wylde fan at all by any means. Last year Zakk Wylde put out an album on with the group Zakk Sabbath. I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan, and as much as I hated his work with Ozzy, and I despise Black Label Society. I think Black Label Society are one of the worst things to ever happen to metal music. As much as people want to pin that on baby metal and stuff, that honor very much is owned by Black Label Society. If you want proof of that, watch the video for Damn That River, when they have 2 children playing Dimebag and fucking and Zakk Wylde, and it is like the cringest shit I have ever seen. Again, a further lack of self-awareness is the reason for that. But the aggressiveness I'm talking about, you can see it in the comments sections of stuff too. Stuff that you and I listening to now, that you the listener know, the stuff that we would talk about, like we would have a conversation about that maybe in the smoking area at a gig. We're not going to come to blows over it, but you see on Facebook, once someone disagrees with someone else about something, it's the equivalent of like squatting over their dinner and shitting in their soup. Like, you've just fucking started some serious shit there. Like you see in the comment section, specifically a great example is Metallica. Like, I'm not a particular fan of anything Metallica did from the Black Album on. Just not for me. There's some people that as soon as you say that, they start fucking ripping the hair out of their head, and they're like, what? You know what I mean? They go fucking ballistic over it. Yeah, that noise. What the fuck was that noise I'm after making? You can tell I have a dry throat. And anyway, the people are very quick to come to blows over very, very menial shit over the internet. Like, and I think it has gotten worse over lockdown too, because people are locked inside. They're locked inside their houses. People are more angry and aggressive than normal. So naturally, people would kind of just be fucking quit. The people are argumentative now. They want something to be, they want to put their anger into something, and it's very much manifesting itself online now. Like, there's a lot of people that claim to be music journalists online, and their only attempt at journalism is literally just slating albums. Like, if you think you're a journalist by just sitting down talking shit about bands, that's not what journalism is. It is what criticism is, but if all you do is give negative criticism, then that's not really productive journalism. I would be a firm believer, and particularly with what I do with From the Depths, I don't like to put a spotlight on. I don't like to put a spotlight on stuff I don't like. I just have to realise, and I never got onto that point I said about, I was making about Zach Sabbath. I went on to a bit of a rant about him. The reason that I mentioned that whole thing with albums and stuff like that is Zach Sabbath, that's some Black Sabbath tribute he put together and everything like that, and I decided I was going to give, they were putting out an album called Vertigo. The album cover very much fitted the first 3 album vibe of Black Sabbath. Vertigo being like the label for, I don't know, was their entire early output, or it was at least for Paranoid anyway, because I know from looking at that, when that vinyl is playing, I know the Vertigo logo is on it and stuff, and I was like, okay, I'll give it the college try and everything like this, and I listened to it, and I fucking hated it, and I went on record, like, I drunkenly posted on Facebook that it was the worst thing to ever happen to metal and stuff like this, and it was a piece of shit album. Do I feel that strongly about it now? No. I do think it is a fucking atrocious album, and very much deserving of my worst album of 2020. But is it the worst thing to happen to metal? No. It just misses the margin. There's probably a lot worse that has happened. So yeah, that aggressiveness surrounding metal is a big thing. That is a big, big negative thing for me anyway. Now we move on to the ugly. This is kind of stuff that I've noticed particularly in this past year. I've noticed it more so in this past year, and a lot of this, to be quite honest with you, is specific to Instagram. It's specific things that exist on Instagram that do not exist on Facebook. One thing I've noticed is there is a very clear and newfound gender divide emerging amongst metalheads that use social media. Now, when I talk about that, I know there is probably one or two that are listening that are probably thinking, "Oh, he's about to have a go at those women that post standing beside their records and stuff." And I'm actually not. I'm actually not going to have a go about that. You can do whatever you want to do and everything like that. I'm not going to sit here and judge. That's not what I'm here to do. One thing I have noticed is there is an ongoing kind of a growing kind of thing where there are people who are trying to become metal influencers online, and they are, for lack of a better term, they are those people who stand just holding their records beside a shelf of vinyls or on a nice carpet or something. And it's not gender specific, lads do it too. Quite a lot of lads do it, in fact. And whether you are a guy or a girl doing it, I would like you to respectfully note that that is some cringe ass shit, and you should fucking stop it now. No one wants to see you standing beside a record, no matter how many shit tattoos you have, no matter how retro the crop top, whether you're a male or female, or is wearing. I don't want to be seeing that shit, and I think the majority of you listening to this podcast today don't want to be seeing it either. When I follow hashtags like metal or heavy metal online, I do like to be seeing records. I do like to be seeing photos from gigs. I do like to be seeing photos of people together. I don't want to be seeing your fucking selfies beside your record that you're fucking spending your dole money on. Again, that's just me, but I know there is a lot of people out there that share the same belief. But the gender divide I'm getting at with that is, I have a lot of friends who do that. I have a lot of friends who do that type of shit on Facebook, or not on Facebook, on Instagram. And again, as much of a gripe as I have it, to teach their own. If you want to do that, it's a free world. You go and you do that, and you enjoy the shit out of it if you like doing that. It's not for me, and I might have it. I might not be the biggest fan of people doing it, but if you do it, I'm not going to fucking attack you over it either. That's, do you know what I mean? It's your life, do it the way you want to do it and everything like that. What I have noticed though is, out of my friends who do it, particularly my mates that are the women that do it, my mates that are women that do this, there seems to be this gender divide arising, where when they post pictures of records and stuff like that, there are lads who would like message them straight away being like, "Oh, right, if you like that band name, like 5 of your favourite songs by them," or whatever, right? It's childish shit. No one really does it in the real world, but there seems to be this like manufactured like belief that is stemmed from that happening online, amongst female, for lack of a better term, metal influencers online, that is the general attitude of male metalheads, which is absolute bullshit. And I mean that sincerely, because I have just as many mates into metal that are men as I do that are. I have just as many mates that are male, sorry, that are into metal as I do that are female. I don't see it being a male dominated thing at all anymore. Nor should it be. It should be open to anyone to be involved if they want to be. Like I touched on earlier, if you want to be involved in any way, you should be able to be involved. But I do take issue with the people online who are starting to convey the image that there is a gender divide there, when I don't believe it to be so. I believe the ones who do that are wrong to be doing that. Of course, they're wrong to be doing that, and people should be called out for that behaviour when they do it. But I do not believe it is equally right to go and generalise an entire sex or gender of people because of that. On either side of on either side of that coin, I don't think it's right for female metal influencers, again, for lack of a better term, to be sharing that mindset. In the same way, I don't believe it to be right for lads to go out of their way to message, again, for lack of a better term, female metal influencers for doing that shit. And the reason I believe that to be the case is because, like I said, I have a load of mates that do it, both male and female. My male mates that do that, I have never seen one of them to get a negative comment about doing it. It seems to very, very much be a female only problem, or a problem that only affects women, I should say. And that's where the issue is. It's weird because the divide is different. There is, like I said, a very, very evident arising newfound gender divide on Instagram in relation to metalheads. But it's weird. It's like the lads that seem to find this divide to be a thing. Like, I can acknowledge it's there. I don't agree with it, but I can acknowledge it's there. The lads who partake in who cause the divide, I should say, are the ones who will be like messaging people shit like that and making stupid claims like women shouldn't be into metal, just stupid shit like that. Like, do you know what I mean? And then on the other side of that, it's another wrong then, and it's throwing fuel in the fire when women generalize and say that all lads do that, which is not true, and that it's just absolute bullshit. And either behavior is not right, is basically the point I want to make. And I am I'm asking now respectfully that if any of you listening decide to take what I'm after saying and view that as sexism, to rewind the past few minutes of what I've been saying, because I am saying there is a newfound gender divide that affects both genders, and both sides are adding to the problem. Okay? You shouldn't be generalising about lads, and you shouldn't be generalising about women. If a woman wants to put a photo of herself posing with a record online, she should be able to do so without being questioned about her genuine interest in the band by lads on Instagram. And at the same token, female metal influencers on Instagram should not be generalising that all lads are like that, when that is not the case. Two wrongs do not make a right, and both sides need to check themselves respectfully. As well as that, harassment feeds into what I just said there. A lot of people are very quick to message each other online, threatening each other with real life consequences over small founded things online. You may think to yourself, well, Emmett, that's a general thing that happens on the internet. That's not very specific to metal. I have seen issues like this manifest in the real world. It is an issue that we very much need to be taking a look at, and we very much need to collectively, I think, be calling people out on that. If you are messaging someone threatening to pull out a knife over an argument you had about a fucking Exciter record on a record group, fucking check yourself and sort your shit out. That is not adult behaviour. That's not what adults do. And for fuck's sake, if it hasn't been apparent by now, leave your fucking knives at home. That is a real thing that happened. I was witness to that about a year or so ago. Someone pulling a knife on another person on the road towards Dolan's over an argument they had online over a record. Both were obviously obliterated drunk. I was sober walking to a gig when this happened. I believe it to be, it wasn't the last siege that happened in October. I think it was the April beforehand. I came in after work and I was witness to that, and it was the most stupid situation I've ever seen in my life. Thankfully, both parties were too drunk to do anything about it, but the fact that a knife even came into play was ridiculous. But the point that I'm making through that is online harassment. If you have a disagreement with someone online, which feeds into the earlier topic of aggressiveness and aggro behaviour that feeds into online metal culture, like there's no need to go messaging people about that. Like it feeds into at the same point. Is there any point in taking personal jabs at someone if they don't have the same opinion as you? There's the rule of thumb is you don't talk about sports, religion, and politics at family gatherings. And I think when it comes to like online metal communities, we need to start throwing fucking specific bans into that because it seems to be causing serious issues. But like the point I want to make, and I very nearly went off on a tangent there and caught myself. Harassment can come in the form of people having a disagreement and then private messages go ahead and people threatening to fucking meet up and have a scrap over differing opinions over an album. People deciding that they're no longer going to be friends because they had a falling out over something very, very menial. I've been on the receiving end of this myself. I received a threat on a patch page about a year or so ago for calling out a scammer who tried to sell me a ticket to the Invictus gig that was happening in Limerick about over a year ago now. The woman tried to sell me 2 tickets for €120, both of which were fake. She was trying to sell these terrible bootleg Metallica patches. You've probably all seen them before. They were the very, very poorly made Metallica ones with like the exploited logo on them with the skull with the mohawk. I commented below. I shared the screenshots of the messages everyone had sent to me about the tickets and about them being fake and everything like that. And I put them onto the thing. I posted them in the comments, and I received like the longest fucking death threat in the most broken English I've ever experienced in my life. I remember one of the lines being, "I will stick long knife up ass." That was one of the threats on the thing. So stuff like that is lighthearted. That's obviously not going to affect me in the real world. But there is a lot of times where that shit does actually have real world effects, real world implications, and it is very unfortunate to see. And it's very unfortunate, like, you know, it's fantastic that people take music that seriously, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit petty that people make a point of going out of their way to ruin someone's day over it too. It's a bit fucking ridiculous. And my final point to be made about the ugly side of these things is it can put people off. Tall John, that was on the podcast last week, made a great point of we were talking a little bit about how people under the age of 18 being allowed into the siege until 6 o'clock, how it acts as a good thing because it gives them an introduction into the Irish metal scene. And as well as that, I know for me anyway, it taught me what to do and what not to do when in a real pub. Do you know what I mean? When in a real adult pub when I was about 16, 17, I knew what to do and what not to do when in that type of circumstance and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people that, was a great learning experience for me because when I turned 18 then, you see a lot of people when they turn 18, they were fucking acting messy as fuck in the pub. Because of like because of how sound the staff and Dolan's were to allow people our age to be in there, I learned very quickly to have respect for bartenders and stuff like that, as you should do anyway. But it was it made me want to become invested in the Irish scene, and it very much resulted in me becoming very invested in the Irish scene and wanting to be a part of it in whatever way I could. And that was because there was always this thing of encouragement. People would, when you go to the siege, whether you're 16, 17, 18 or fucking 85, there's always a sense of there's a community aspect there. Whether you're like I said this last week in the podcast, my favorite thing about the siege is the situations where you lose all your mates and you don't know anyone there, and next thing you know you're having a pint with like some techno head and like someone's dad who came to collect him and somehow got lost in the shuffle and now he's drinking too. Those are my favourite moments of the siege and stuff like that. But the main point of it is that sense of community and encouragement and being made feel welcome is a fantastic part of metal in general. Those ugly sides of online culture related to metal can put people off. Like if you're a 16-year-old and you're on these groups and you only know the big four, that's all you know musically is just the big four as it relates to metal, and you put up a post like, "Oh, I'm just getting into metal, I want to get into Iron Maiden, what albums should I check out?" And you're going to get loads of really supportive things just being like, "Oh, you should listen to like the first 2 albums with Di'Anno, listen to like Somewhere in Time, Power Slave," stuff like that. You get loads of supportive things like that, and someone will be like, "Oh, I was your age when I was getting into Maiden too, like, keep the faith," and all this kind of shit. And then you'll always have like some fucker who probably has had a drink or going, "If you don't know Maiden, fuck off." And me and my mates now will probably do something like that, but it's always made apparent it's messing. Do you know what I mean? There might be like a winky face or something like that, and then after that message is like, I would recommend checking this out. Do you know what I mean? Bit of like hazing, like, do you know what I mean? Light-hearted, encouraging hazing. But there's people who don't do that messing. They do it deadly serious. And it puts people off getting into metal. And, you know, there is the argument to be made, well, if that's going to throw you off to listen to a genre of music, well, then you should fuck off. And, you know, something, I get that, but at the same time, if you're a teenager or an adult or acting like this, it's kind of like, well, maybe I don't want to get involved in this. Maybe I don't want to have anything to do with this, because maybe if someone's acting like that at 45, maybe this music isn't really something I want to be a part of. And yeah, it can really put people off. And I'm very, very lucky in the fact that, like, I've always kept short hair. And you're probably thinking, why you even mention this? I've always kept short hair. All my mates have always had long hair. And normally when we've gone to gigs and stuff, particularly when we're younger, when we go to gigs, I'd always get shit for not having long hair. The reason I didn't have long hair is I'm kind of vain and I didn't think it would suit. But I'd always, like when I was younger, I was always labelled a poser and shit like this. And the irony in all of that is, out of the group of mates that I got into metal with, I would say, I'm going to give an estimate that there was 20 of us. I'd say maybe 5 of us listen to metal. And out of that 5, myself and one other are the only 2 that regularly go to gigs and actually contribute anything to metal as a whole. Like, he can do so through music. And like, now the fella I'm talking about hasn't played in a while, unfortunately. I'm hoping he will do at some point in the future again. But like, he'd be able to do it through that and through giving people music recommendations online. I do it through From the Depths. I do it through making podcasts like this. I do it through hosting a radio show where I try and turn some ears onto some sounds that I think are pretty cool too. So yeah, that whole thing of like that negative kind of attitudes and shit towards that negative kind of behaviours that manifest in online metal communities and stuff like that, I think it can really, really put people off getting involved. Not people that are older per se. Well, actually, that's a good point to be made too, actually. It just comes to mind of, like, what happens to the older person who is just finding Facebook for the first time. The person who's in their late 50s, early 60s, isn't really tech savvy. And if they put up a post asking, how do you link a YouTube video to a page, no doubt you would be met by shit and laughing reactions for that. But if you haze that person and you slate them too much, that's someone who could have been collecting records for years, and they could have some absolute Irish gems that you or I don't know about. Bands that might have just put demos together, and he could have uploaded those to YouTube or be looking to put that onto YouTube, but because of that negative, shitty behaviour, they don't do that. And perhaps those demos are in turn lost forever. So that's a good thought, and that is a good piece to maintain and keep mindful of too. So that is basically it. That's basically the good, the bad, and the ugly in my mind in relation to not Irish metal, in relation to online internet culture as it relates to heavy metal. So what are the lessons to be learned from this? We kind of touched on all the lessons to be learned throughout, but the main lesson to be learned is pretty much don't act on the internet the same way you wouldn't in real life. It sounds very patronising for me to be even saying this, and I know a lot of you probably agreeing with it now, probably being like, oh, go fuck yourself, do you know what I mean? And I don't blame you. I'd say the same if someone said this to me on a podcast. But I do maintain it costs nothing to be sound, it costs nothing to be nice. And look, whatever my gripes were that I mentioned with Irish metal or with Ireland metalheads and everything like that, I make my day easier by not leaving myself open to see that. So I remove myself from the group, and then I just engage with things I want to see, and it makes my day a lot easier, makes my day a lot handier. And I know a lot of you listen to the exact same. So yeah, it costs nothing to be sound. Be sound. Treat people the same way you'd want to be treated yourself, and everything like that. And sure, look, if people are going to be posers and stuff like that online, let them off. Don't engage them. They're not worth the time or the negative energy or any of that shit. It's never worth feeding into. Let them off. Posers be posing, boomers be booming. That's the lesson to be learned from this episode from this podcast. That's been the first kind of ranty episode of From the Depths podcast. It took me 2 goes to record this. I took a break, came back and recorded it 1 go, and it actually flew. And in hindsight, I'm actually pretty happy with this. I kind of stayed on point for a lot, except when I started my point about the whole Zakk Wylde Black Sabbath thing, and then forgot what I was talking about and had to come back to it a minute later. But sure, look, caught myself in that. If you enjoyed this episode of the From the Depths podcast, you can find all the 3 previous episodes of the From the Depths podcast below wherever you found this one. Episode 1 features Eric Bell of Thin Lizzy. Episode 2 features Mr. David O'Mahony of Cork black metal band Gallock. Episode 3 features Mr. Tall John of Bad Reputation Limerick. Next week's episode we'll have to wait and see what that's going to be about. If you want to keep an eye on what's to come with the podcast, if you want to keep up to date with the podcast, if you want to keep up to date with the radio show we do, you can follow us on Instagram at From the Depths Metal. That's the best way to keep up to date with everything that I do in relation to From the Depths. I share records, I share band tracks from bands that I think deserved a little bit of a share. I share information with regards to upcoming episodes of the podcast, as well as upcoming episodes of the radio show I host too. And as well as that, if you want to find all the links to everything related From the Depths, the link to the podcasts and the YouTube channel and everything like that, it's actually in the bio for the Instagram, on the Instagram page. So that's at From the Depths Metal. Can you tell I'm kind of a bit of a tech phobe from the way that I said link in bio there? As well as that, you can find us on Facebook at From the Depths Metal Radio also. So yeah, that has been this episode of the From the Depths podcast. If you enjoyed that, let me know. First one of the ranty podcasts. I can do more if you want to hear them. If you absolutely despise that, be sure to let me know too. All criticism is welcome at this party. So yeah, my name has been Emmett. Lads, thank you very, very much for listening to another episode of the From the Depths podcast. And I will see you on Wednesday for another episode of Cuts from the Crypt at 8 p.m. on Wire 99.9 FM. And I will catch you here next Monday for another episode of the From the Depths podcast. So, signing off, guys. I've been Emmett, and have a fucking fantastic week. Good night and God bless.